It's been years, but the sound of it, that low, guttural voice, still haunts me. My name's Doris, and I live alone now, up in the thick woods of northern Washington. I'd like to say it's peaceful here, but I can't. Not anymore. Back in October of 2018, it was just like any other quiet night. The rain had been falling for days, the kind that soaks into everything, the trees just dripping with it. I was on the porch, rocking back and forth in my chair, when I heard something that shouldn't have been there. It was a knock, deep and slow, not the usual sound of the house settling. I thought maybe it was a bear or deer, something simple, but then I heard it again. 3 knocks, and that's when I saw it, standing just outside the beam of my porch light. I shouldn't be telling you this, but it's been years, and I've still got the footage, but I won't share it. Not unless I have to, because what that creature, that Bigfoot, told me, well, it changes everything. It was late September 2018 near the Cascades, about 40 miles from the nearest town. The kind of fall night where the wind picks up sharp and the chill settles deep in your bones. My cabin sits at the end of a gravel road, tucked against the tree line, just me and my dog Molly. I'm used to the isolation by now. You get used to the quiet when you've lived somewhere long enough. There's a certain peace to it, or there was. I spend my days with simple tasks, walking the property line, checking the old bear traps I never set anymore, doing what I can to stay active. I've lived here my whole life, raised my son here before he moved to Seattle. I'd always dismissed the local talk about creatures in the woods as nonsense, just something people said to scare tourists or fill up slow nights at the tavern. But something about that first night made me question everything I thought I knew. I told myself it was the rain drumming on the metal roof, or the wind rattling the shutters, or just my imaginations playing tricks after too many quiet evenings alone. But even as I thought that, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched through the windows. Molly was nervous too, pacing the living room in tight circles. She kept barking at the woods beyond the porch, and I'd hush her, tell her to settle down, but there was a look in her eyes that unsettled me deep. It wasn't like her at all. She'd been with me 7 years and never spooked easy. That night she wouldn't eat her dinner, just stayed pressed against my leg while I tried to read by the lamp. Outside, the rain kept falling, and somewhere past the tree line, I could have sworn I heard something moving, something big. I had heard the stories growing up, of course, like everyone else around here. Every small town in the Pacific Northwest has its legends, its mysterious noises in the night, its blurry photographs passed around the diner. Some of the neighbors swore by it, said they'd seen prints or heard calls that didn't match any known animal. Old Carl, who lives 2 miles down the logging road, had been talking about strange happenings for years. The ranger at the station would mention it too, usually with a half smile, but I figured he was just humoring the locals who wanted to believe. I always rolled my eyes at the whole thing, filed it away with UFO sightings and lake monsters. It was October now, the first week, and the first real storm of the season had rolled in hard from the coast. I couldn't see much of the woods in the dark, just shapes and shadows moving with the wind. But I could hear the storm's fury in the trees, branches cracking and scraping against each other. There was something off about the silence that followed each gust, though. The way everything seemed to hold its breath between the wind surges. That night, when I heard the knocks again, my heart skipped hard in my chest. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, spaced about 5 seconds apart, just like before. But this time, Molly wasn't barking or pacing. She was silent, frozen in place, staring at the door with her ears flat against her head. I couldn't ignore it anymore, couldn't pretend it was just the house settling or a branch hitting the siding. Maybe it's just a bear, I said out loud to Molly, trying to convince myself more than her. But I knew deep down it wasn't. Bears don't knock 3 times in rhythm. Bears don't wait. I stood up from my chair, the book sliding off my lap onto the floor. My hands were shaking as I moved toward the window, pulling back the curtain just an inch. The porch light was still on, casting a weak yellow glow across the wet boards and the first few feet of yard. Beyond that, nothing but darkness and rain. I waited there for maybe 10 minutes, watching, listening. The knocks didn't come again that night, but the feeling of being watched never left, not even after I locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle before going to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling while the storm battered the roof. The wind howled outside in long, mournful sweeps through the trees. But there was something else mixed in with it, something closer, something that didn't fit the pattern of the weather. I could hear it faintly through the walls, a deep rustling at the edge of the property near the old tool shed. It wasn't steady like the wind, but came in bursts, deliberate movements. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer and stepped outside onto the porch, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but everything was soaked, dripping. That's when I saw it for the first time, really saw it. Something big moving just beyond the trees at the property line, maybe 60 feet from where I stood. A shape, hulking and dark, almost blending perfectly into the shadows between the trunks. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze with my hand on the A flashlight button. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, told myself it was a trick of the darkness, maybe a stump or a boulder I'd just never noticed before. But the way it moved, slow and deliberate, shifting its weight from side to side, I couldn't deny it. It was huge, at least 7 or 8 feet tall, broader than any man. And then it made a sound low and rumbling, almost like a grunt or a deep exhale. I froze completely, every muscle locked. I told myself it was the wind again. I whispered to no one, but it didn't feel like wind. It didn't feel like anything I'd ever known in these woods, and I'd lived here 43 years. The shape didn't come closer, didn't move toward the cabin. It just stood there, watching me watch it. Molly was still inside, hiding under the kitchen table, and I couldn't blame her one bit. I didn't want to go back inside and turn my back on whatever that thing was, but I couldn't stay out there either, standing in the cold drizzle with nothing but a flashlight. Eventually, I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the tree line, and slipped inside. I locked the door and didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream, maybe just exhaustion and an overactive imagination. I kept thinking about it, though, replaying it in my mind. Those 3 knocks, that massive shadow at the tree line. The neighbors had seen something too, I found out later that week. Old Carl came by to check on me around noon, driving his beat-up truck up the gravel road. I could see it in his eyes before he even said anything, that look of someone who's seen something they can't explain. "You hear anything strange last night?" he asked, his voice quiet and careful. I shook my head at first, didn't want to admit it out loud, but the look in his eyes told me he already knew. He'd heard it too, from his place 2 miles down. "Could have been Bigfoot," he said, and he wasn't laughing or smiling when he said it. "There's been a lot of talk around here the past few weeks. Footprints up near Miller's Creek, strange calls at night. Just remember, Doris, don't go poking around after dark. Whatever's out there, they're not friendly when they're scared." I didn't say anything back, just nodded and thanked him for stopping by. What could I say? I'd spent my whole life not believing in Bigfoot, thought it was just campfire stories and hoaxes. But that didn't explain the knocking or the shadow I'd seen moving between the trees. Something was out there in my woods, and maybe, just maybe, it was something I couldn't explain away with logic or common sense. That afternoon, I walked the property line in daylight, Molly staying close to my heels. I found them about 20 yards from where I'd seen the shape, footprints in the soft mud near the creek bed. They were massive, at least 16 inches long, wider than my boot by half. The toes were clearly defined, 5 of them pressed deep into the earth. They didn't match any bear print I'd ever seen, and I'd seen plenty. These were different. They looked almost human, but wrong, too big and too wide. I stood there staring at them for a long time, trying to make sense of it, trying to make it into something normal, but I couldn't. I took a few pictures with my phone, though the reception out here was terrible and they didn't upload. Then I walked back to the cabin and locked the doors early that night. It wasn't long before I began to notice more signs, little things that added up to something I couldn't ignore. More footprints in the mud outside the cabin, always appearing overnight, always too big to be anything normal. And the smell, that was new, or maybe I just hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't like anything I'd smelled in these woods, and I knew every scent these trees held. This was strong and musky, like wet fur but heavier, earthier, almost overwhelming when the wind shifted just right. I told myself it was a bear again, kept trying to make it fit into something I understood, but the prints didn't match, and bears don't knock 3 times on cabin doors in the middle of the night. Bears don't wait and watch. Then one afternoon, maybe a week after Carl's visit, I saw it again. Just a glimpse through the kitchen window while I was washing dishes. A shadow in the trees, tall and wide, standing maybe 40 feet from the cabin. It wasn't trying to hide this time, wasn't blending into the forest. It was just there, standing still as a stone, watching the house. My heart raced so hard, I thought I might pass out. I dropped the plate I'd been holding, and it shattered in the sink. By the time I looked back up, the shadow was gone, melted back into the timber without a sound. That night the knocks came again, slower this time, more deliberate. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more, like it was waiting for me to answer, like it was trying to communicate. I sat in my chair by the cold fireplace, Molly pressed against my legs, and I listened. The knocks came from different sides of the cabin each time, first the front door, then the back, then the side wall, near my bedroom window. It was circling the house, checking each side. I knew I should call someone, the ranger or the sheriff, but what would I say? That Bigfoot was knocking on my doors? They'd think I'd lost my mind, maybe send someone to check if I was safe to live alone. So I sat there in the dark and I listened, and I tried to understand what it wanted. The knocks stopped around midnight, and the forest went silent again. Too silent. I didn't sleep that night either, just sat in the chair with the flashlight in my lap until the sun came up gray and cold through the windows. By now, I couldn't deny what was happening, no matter how much I wanted to. I'd been hearing about Bigfoot my entire life. The stories, the sightings, the grainy photographs that never proved anything. It was always just talk, just local folklore that tourists ate up and locals rolled their eyes at. But now I was living it, experiencing it firsthand, and I felt foolish for all those years of dismissing it. What was I supposed to think when there was a creature out there, something massive and intelligent, knocking on my door in the middle of the night, leaving footprints bigger than my head, watching my cabin from the tree line? I told myself it wasn't real, kept trying to find rational explanations. Maybe it was a person in a costume, some cruel prank. But who would do that, night after night in this weather, miles from anywhere? And the prints? You can't fake prints that deep, that detailed. Molly was worse now, wouldn't leave my side during the day, refused to go outside after dark no matter how much she needed to. I didn't blame her one bit. Every time I heard those knocks echoing through the cabin walls, I felt that deep sense of dread settling in my stomach. But also something else, something I didn't expect. A strange connection, like whatever it was out there, it wasn't trying to harm me. It was trying to tell me something. The ranger came by that Thursday, making his monthly rounds through the remote properties. I almost told him everything, almost showed him the pictures on my phone and the footprints by the creek. But when I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. I saw the way he looked at me, that concerned expression, like he was already wondering if the isolation was getting to me. So instead, I just said everything was fine. Thanked him for checking in. He mentioned that other folks in the area had been reporting strange sounds, but he chalked it up to the usual suspects. Bears getting ready for winter, cougars moving through. Nothing to worry about, Doris, he said with that professional smile. Just keep your doors locked and don't leave food out. I nodded and watched him drive away, and I felt more alone than ever. That night, I made a decision. I set up my old video camera on the kitchen table, pointed it at the front door, and let it record. If the knocks came again, I'd have proof. Evidence. Something to show I wasn't crazy, that this was real. I went to bed around 10, and around 2 in the morning, I heard them. 3 slow knocks, clear and deliberate. I lay there in the dark, listening, knowing the camera was running, knowing that whatever was out there, I'd finally have proof of it. It was a week later, around midnight on a Tuesday, when I heard something new. I was in bed, trying to sleep through another storm, rain hammering the roof in steady waves. Then I heard it, a voice. It wasn't loud, just a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the walls. At first, I thought it was just the wind finding some gap in the house, creating that weird moaning sound old cabins make, but then I heard it again, clearer this time. It wasn't wind. It was something speaking, something with a voice deeper than any human's. The way it rumbled in the air, I could feel it in my bones, in my chest. It wasn't English, wasn't any language I recognized, but it was unmistakable. It was communication. I shot up from bed, my heart hammering, and grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I stepped out into the main room, Molly whimpering from under the bed, and I moved toward the front door. I could hear it more clearly now, that deep voice coming from just beyond the porch. It rose and fell in what sounded almost like sentences, like it was trying to explain something. I knew I shouldn't. Knew every instinct was screaming at me to stay inside, lock the doors, hide. But I couldn't stop myself. I needed to see it, needed to confirm what I already knew in my gut. I opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking, and stepped out onto the wet porch boards. The rain had slowed to a light mist, and the porch light was flickering, throwing unstable shadows across the yard. And there, just beyond the reach of the light, I could see it clearly for the first time. A Bigfoot. Not a shadow, not a shape, but real and solid. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that glistened with rain. Its face was partially hidden in shadow, but I could see its eyes reflecting the porch light. Amber-colored, intelligent, focused on me. It stood there, watching me, and then it spoke again. That deep, rumbling voice, and somehow, impossibly, I understood the emotion behind it even if I couldn't understand the words. It wasn't threatening, it was urgent. I could hardly breathe, standing there on my porch in my nightgown and boots, staring at something that shouldn't exist. Something that every rational part of my brain said was impossible, but there it was. Real as the rain falling around us, real as the porch boards under my feet. It took one step closer, and I flinched, but it stopped immediately, raising one massive hand in what looked almost like a calming gesture. And then it spoke again, and this time, one word cut through the rumbling, clear enough that I caught it. Child! It was trying to tell me about a child. I'm not crazy, I kept telling myself over the next few days. It's just stress, just isolation playing tricks. But when the knocks came again, when I played back the video I'd recorded, I knew better. The footage was dark, grainy, but you could see it. A massive figure standing at the edge of the porch light, moving with impossible grace for something so large. And on the audio, that voice, deep and resonant, clearly not wind or house sounds. I watched it maybe 20 times, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The words weren't clear on the recording, just that low rumbling, but I knew what I'd heard that night. Child. That's what it had said. The child. It was trying to tell me something about a lost child, and I couldn't make sense of it. There were no children living out here, not for miles. The nearest family with kids was in town, 40 minutes away by car. I should have packed up Molly and driven to my son's place in Seattle, never looked back. But I didn't. I couldn't explain it, but something kept me there. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something deeper, a sense that this creature, this Bigfoot, needed my help, that it had chosen me for a reason. I started researching online when I could get a signal, reading everything I could find about Bigfoot sightings in the area. Most of it was nonsense, obvious hoaxes or misidentified animals, but there were a few accounts that rang true, stories from people who sounded like me, rational, skeptical, until something happened they couldn't explain. One account from a hunter in 1983 mentioned hearing something that sounded like words, like the creature was trying to communicate. Another from a woman in Oregon described finding gifts left at her property line, baskets of berries, stacked stones, bird feathers arranged in patterns, signs of intelligence, of intention. That's when I started paying closer attention to my own property, and I found them, small signs I'd missed before. A stack of smooth river stones near the creek arranged in a careful pyramid. A woven basket made from cedar strips left on a stump near the tree line. And feathers, dozens of them, tied together with what looked like plant fibers and hanging from a low branch like some kind of marker. They'd been there for days, maybe weeks, and I'd walked right past them without noticing. The Bigfoot had been leaving me messages, trying to communicate in ways I'd been too blind or too scared to see. I stood there looking at that feather bundle, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't a monster. This was something else entirely, something that thought and planned and tried to reach across the impossible gap between our species. The next few days were a blur of watching and waiting. I kept hearing the knocks, 3 slow rhythms that had become almost familiar now, but I wasn't sure anymore if they were real or just echoing in my mind. Molly still refused to go outside after dark, and I'd stopped forcing her, just let her do her business close to the porch during daylight. The forest felt different now, like something had fundamentally changed. The air was thicker, heavier with moisture and something else I couldn't name. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched constantly, not in a threatening way, but like someone keeping guard, like something was out there, keeping its distance, observing, protecting maybe. I decided to search the woods more thoroughly, to try and understand what the Bigfoot had meant about a child. I thought maybe there'd been an accident years ago, some tragedy I didn't know about, and it was trying to tell me where to find remains or evidence. I know how that sounds, but I was grasping for explanations. I walked deeper into the timber than I'd gone in years, following game trails and old logging roads that were barely visible anymore. Molly stayed at the cabin. I didn't have the heart to make her come with me. The deeper I went, the more that feeling intensified, like I was being followed, but not by anything dangerous. More like escorted, guided even. I found a small clearing about a mile from the cabin, tucked between 2 ridges where the trees grew thick, and there, at the base of an old cedar, I saw something that stopped me cold. A child's toy, a small stuffed bear, weathered and faded, but still recognizable. It was sitting on a flat rock like it had been placed there deliberately, recently even, because it wasn't completely soaked through despite the rain we'd had. I picked it up with shaking hands. turned it over, looking for any tags or marks. Nothing, just a simple brown bear, the kind you could buy at any store. But what was it doing here, miles from anywhere? Who had left it? I looked around the clearing, my heart pounding, expecting to see the Bigfoot watching from the trees. But there was nothing, just the wind moving through the branches and the sound of water dripping from the needles. I put the toy back exactly where I'd found it and backed away slowly. I didn't want to disturb whatever this place was, whatever significance it held. As I walked back toward the cabin, I couldn't shake the thought that I'd stumbled onto something important, something sacred maybe, and I realized with a cold certainty that I didn't want to find any child. I wasn't ready for whatever truth might be waiting in these woods. Some things, maybe, were meant to stay hidden. I didn't find anything else that day, not even a trace of what I was looking for. But I found something else on my way back to the cabin. Another gift, a basket, larger than the first one, woven from fresh cedar and willow branches. It was left right at the tree line where my property met the forest, sitting on a stump I passed every day. Inside were berries, huckleberries mostly, still fresh, and some kind of roots I didn't recognize. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like it was meant for me specifically, like an offering, or maybe a thank you for something I didn't understand yet. Something deep inside me, some instinct I didn't know I had, told me not to touch it, not to take it or disturb it. But I couldn't just leave it there either. Couldn't ignore this clear attempt at communication, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I took the basket, brought it inside, and I left my own gift in return. I filled a bowl with apples from my root cellar and a loaf of bread I'd baked that morning, and I set it on that same stump before dark. Then I went inside and waited. That night, the knocks stopped. The forest felt silent, almost too quiet, like every creature in the woods was holding its breath. I couldn't sleep, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, something I didn't have words for, a kind of reverence maybe, or awe. I kept getting up and checking the window, looking out at the tree line, expecting to see that massive shape standing there. But there was nothing, just darkness and the faint glow of starlight filtering through the clouds. In the morning, the bowl was empty, not just the food gone, but the bowl itself taken, vanished without a trace. And in its place, 3 smooth stones stacked in a careful cairn. I stood on the porch in my robe and boots, coffee steaming in my hands. And I stared at those stones for a long time. This was real. This was happening. I was communicating, somehow, with a Bigfoot, a creature that every scientist said didn't exist, that every skeptic called a hoax. But it was here, on my land, leaving gifts and taking offerings. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something other than fear. I felt wonder. That day I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't tell anyone else about this. Not the ranger, not the sheriff, not even my son. This was between me and whatever was out there in my woods. I'd keep it secret, protect it the way it seemed to be protecting me. And I'd wait to see what it wanted, what it was trying to tell me about that child. A few days later, I heard the voice again, distant and soft, drifting through the trees just before dawn. It wasn't as loud as before, but it was still there, that deep rumbling tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I didn't go outside this time. Something told me not to, told me to wait and listen instead. I sat by the window in my bedroom, the curtain pulled back just enough to see the tree line in the gray pre-dawn light. And I watched as the Bigfoot emerged from the forest, moving with that same deliberate grace I'd seen before. It was carrying something, cradled in its massive arms with surprising gentleness, At first, I couldn't make out what it was through the dim light and distance, but as it came closer, stopping maybe 30 feet from the cabin, I saw it was a child, a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing muddy clothes and no shoes. The Bigfoot set him down carefully on the ground, steadying him when he swayed, and then it stepped back. The boy didn't run or scream. He just stood there, looking up at the creature, and then he turned toward my cabin and started walking. I was out the door before I could think, running across the wet grass in my bare feet. The boy saw me coming and stopped, his face blank with exhaustion and something else. Not fear exactly, but shock maybe, or disbelief. I scooped him up and he was cold, so cold, shivering violently. I looked back toward the tree line, but the Bigfoot was already gone, melted back into the forest like it had never been there. "It's okay," I whispered to the boy, carrying him inside. "You're safe now. You're safe." He couldn't tell me much at first, just cried and shivered while I wrapped him in blankets and made him hot chocolate. Eventually, he said his name was Michael. He'd gotten separated from his family during a camping trip 2 days ago, wandered off a trail, and gotten completely lost. He'd spent one night alone in the woods, terrified, and then the Bigfoot had found him. "It carried me," he said, his voice small and hoarse. "It kept me warm and gave me berries. It wasn't scary. It was nice." I called the sheriff then, reported that I'd found a lost child on my property. They came within an hour, reunited Michael with his frantic parents, asked me 100 questions I mostly couldn't answer. Where exactly did I find him? How did he get to my cabin? Did I see anyone else? I lied. I said he just appeared at my door, that I didn't see how he got there. I could have told them about the Bigfoot, could have shown them the video I'd recorded, the footprints, the gifts, but I didn't, because I understood now what it had been trying to tell me all along. It had been protecting that child, keeping him safe until it could bring him to someone who could help. And it had chosen me. I hadn't heard anything from the Bigfoot in weeks after that, but then it came back. It wasn't like before, though. There were no knocks, no strange voices in the night, just the feeling that it was there, standing in the shadows beyond my property, waiting and watching. And then, just before dawn one morning in late November, I saw it one final time. I'd woken early, couldn't sleep, and I was making coffee in the kitchen when I looked out the window. There it stood at the tree line, massive and still, backlit by the rising sun filtering through the trees. It didn't speak this time, didn't move closer or make any sound, but I knew what it was trying to tell me. It was saying goodbye, or maybe thank you. I stood there with my coffee cup cooling in my hands, and I watched it, really looked at it, memorized every detail I could see in that dim light. The way its shoulders were broader than any man's, the way it stood with a slight forward hunch, the intelligence in those amber eyes even from 40 feet away. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't something to fear. It was just a creature trying to survive in a world that didn't believe in it, protecting what it could, helping when it saw the chance. I raised one hand slowly, a small wave, an acknowledgement, and I swear it nodded, just once, before turning and walking back into the forest. It moved silently, despite its size, disappearing between the trees until I couldn't see it anymore. I stood there for a long time after it was gone, watching the forest, waiting to see if it would come back. But it didn't. That was the last time I saw the Bigfoot, and somehow I knew it would be. Its work here was done. It had saved that child, had proven to me that it existed, that it was real and intelligent, and maybe even kind in its own way. I still have the video footage locked in a drawer in my bedroom. I've never shown it to anyone, never uploaded it, or sent it to researchers or TV shows. Sometimes I take it out and watch it late at night when I can't sleep, when I need to remind myself that it was real, that I didn't imagine the whole thing. Michael's parents sent me a thank you card a few weeks later, said he'd fully recovered, that he still talked about the big furry man who kept him safe. They thought it was trauma, his mind making up a protector to help him cope with being lost. I didn't correct them, let them believe what they needed to believe. I knew the truth, and that was enough. It's been years, and I still hear the 3 knocks sometimes. Always at 3 a.m., always slow and deliberate. When I close my eyes, I can see it standing there, in the shadows at the edge of my property, watching over me the way it watched over that lost boy. I don't know exactly what happened that autumn, can't explain all of it in ways that would satisfy the skeptics. I don't know if it was real in the way science demands proof or if it was something else entirely, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. I'll never forget it. That, Bigfoot, a creature that spoke not out of fear or aggression, but out of something deeper, something almost human, compassion maybe, protection, care. It wasn't a warning it had been trying to give me all those weeks. It was a gift, a chance to see something most people never will, to understand that there's more in these woods than we can explain with our neat categories and scientific papers. And for all my fear during those strange weeks, all my doubts and sleepless nights, I can't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude when I think back on it now. It was real. Maybe not in the way I initially thought, maybe not in a way I can ever prove to anyone else, but it was real to me and to that little boy whose life it saved, and that's what matters. I moved away from that cabin 2 years ago, went to live closer to my son in Seattle. The isolation had gotten to be too much, or maybe I just felt like my time there was finished. But sometimes, late at night when the city is quiet, I'll hear those 3 knocks echoing in my memory. And I'll think about that creature standing at the tree line, amber eyes watching, keeping guard over its territory, and the strange, fragile humans that wander into it. I wonder if it's still out there, still leaving gifts and protecting lost children. I wonder if anyone else has seen it, earned its trust the way I somehow did. I still haven't shared the footage. Maybe someday, when I'm gone, my son will find it and decide what to do with it. But for now, it stays locked away, my secret, and the Bigfoots. A reminder that the world is stranger and more wonderful than we usually allow ourselves to believe. That there are still mysteries hiding in the deep forests, still creatures we haven't cataloged or explained, still magic, if you're willing to see it. And every time I hear those phantom knocks at 3 a.m., I smile a little, remembering the autumn when Bigfoot came to my door and changed everything I thought I knew about what's possible.